Feature going green, and the mining sector is certainly not going green. Acid mine drainage, silicosis, resulting in a huge class action lawsuit. The mining sector in South Africa has left a bleak legacy, and despite legislation over the years, the soot and the dust lingers. Mpumalanga, of course, a problem area. Government has not met its targets to fix the problems there, and there is evidence that communities in built-up areas of Gauteng near Johannesburg are being affected much more than previously thought. Well, to discuss, we're joined by the lead researcher for the Benchmark Foundation looking at this issue, David van Wyk, via Skype. David, thank you very much. You started looking at communities in a report a few years ago called Soweto Waiting to Inhale. Just tell us what you found and what has happened since then.
Well, basically what we found was that the respiratory problems in all the communities that we looked at, except our control community in Danville of Mafikeng, was way above what it should be. Things like asthma, coughing, chest problems, and so on. We found to be sometimes twice, sometimes three times as high as what they were in Danville, where there is no mining. Now, basically, what we know from all the communities that we looked at is that they are bordered by mine waste facilities in the form of tailings, these big yellow mountains that you see on the edge of Johannesburg along Main Reef Road. And those dust tailings, if they're not properly managed, results in dust conditions, especially in the windy seasons between August and November, which blows the dust containing arsenic, lead, silica, uranium, and other heavy metals into the communities that live to the south of those tailings dams. Soweto is almost like a dust bucket because it's inside an area which is lower than the reef itself, and all the mine tailings are on the edge of the reef above Soweto. So when the wind blows across the tailings, it blows the dust into the communities there, and communities complain very bitterly about the impact of that dust.
And you've mentioned Alexander as well. I mean, that's close to Sandton, where people think they live very far away from mining activities, but it's getting closer.
Well, if you drive up the M1 on your right-hand side, just before you get to or just after you've passed Alex, in fact, on its northern side, you have a cement mine there. You can see it on your right-hand side as you go north. And then, of course, there are major highways that surround Alex as well, the M1 and the M3, which is very heavily used by transport, and therefore a lot of exhaust gases, which contains sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, as well as lead, blows into Alex as a consequence of that. So Alex is affected by its specific conditions, whereas the other communities along Main Reef Road are affected by more than 100 years of mining and very badly managed mine waste.
Yeah. And explain the tailings. I mean, is that the same or different to mine dumps? And who is responsible for it right now?
Yeah. Look, the tailings are mine dumps. That's crushed rock that has been crushed into powder form. It was then washed with cyanide in order to extract the gold. Now, the cyanide breaks down fairly quickly, but gold in South Africa occurs naturally with arsenic, with lead, with silica, and uranium. And very often the dust levels in the northern parts of Soweto have the same kind of levels as if you are working in a mine. You mentioned the recent silicosis case in which 500,000 mine workers won a 5 billion rand out-of-court settlement with 5 mining companies. Now, the silica levels in these communities, and the National Institute for Occupational Health agrees with us, the silica levels in the dust in these communities are sometimes just as high as they would have been for mine workers. And of course, these were also uranium mines, especially after 1945. For every 4 grams or so of gold mined, you actually had a ton of uranium mined. And when the uranium prices were low, the uranium was simply dumped on mine dumps. And especially after 1976 with sanctions, no one wanted to buy uranium from South Africa. And consequently, a lot of uranium got dumped. And the uranium processing plants declined from 27 to about 7. And I think currently there are about 2 of them left.
It's incredible what you're saying. Silicosis can be deadly. Are you saying it can be deadly right now to live in Soweto for a long period of time because of the mining activity and what it's left?
Exactly. Look, if you look at 2 studies that followed our study, one was by the South African Medical Research Council looking at arsenic and lead in garden soil in selected Johannesburg suburbs. One suburb was Riverlea, which is surrounded by mine tailings or mine dumps. And there it was found that the arsenic levels were so high that people should not actually garden. They should not actually disturb the soil. In addition, people also have a problem of asbestos roofs, which are very badly deteriorated and which, as the rain washes the asbestos off the roof, also gets into the garden soil. And then there was also a second study that was done, the Riverlea dust study on chronic respiratory conditions by the National Institute of Occupational Health. And that study concluded that the closer you live to a mine dump, the higher your risk of becoming ill, and the longer you live there, the more likely there is that that mine dump will kill you.
This is just awful, David. So who is responsible right now for those mine dumps?
Well, you see, the problem is that our legislation allows for major mining corporations to sell mines when they are no longer profitable. Other people buy the mines, and the people who buy the mines do not have the capacity, the skills, or the resources to actually rehabilitate and close those mines properly. So we've got 6,000 abandoned mines across South Africa, about 600 of them in Gauteng alone. And so the Department of Mineral Resources is responsible. The National Nuclear Regulator is responsible, and the Department of the Environment should be responsible.
But what is being done? I mean, there are laws also about acid mine drainage, about sort of closing up the mines in certain ways, dealing with the cleanup.
Yes.
Are you saying that's not always being enforced and it's hard to find people responsible, I guess, if you have small mining houses without the cash anyway?
Well, the rule is that it's not enforced. Okay, so that's why you've got 6,000 abandoned mines. And in the last year, along Main Reef Road, for example, Central Rand Gold went bankrupt. No one was held accountable. There was no rehabilitation on their operational sites. And Mintails 2 years ago went bankrupt, and they just left a big mess behind in Randfontein. So it's a continuing process. The problem is that all mines are supposed to have mine closure funds that they submit to the Department of Mineral Resources. And there is 60 billion rands in that national fund. But the problem is that it will require about 230 billion rands to repair this mess.
Final question for you. I mean, is government trying at least to deal with this problem? And what rights do the communities have? What recourse do they have?
Well, I think that the communities have recourse in terms of the Constitution. The Constitution says that every South African has a right to a healthy and safe environment. That is Section 24 of Chapter 2 of the Constitution. And there are definite mine closure clauses in the Minerals Petroleum Resource Development Act, Chapter 4, clauses 40 to 47. But the problem is that it would seem as if corporations feel that no one will hold them accountable and therefore they just walk away.
And government, is it trying? That was my question.
Well, I don't think so. I think the new Minister of the Environment has just recently in the last week actually turned down for the first time 2 mining application licenses in Springs for coal mines. Now, that is a good sign. It's a sign that we've got a minister that is prepared to maybe do her job and actually be effective. The previous ministers of the environment, Edna Molewa and so on, they were really, really not effective at all.
All right, let's leave it there, but certainly a worrying situation, and we'll follow that over time. The lead researcher on this issue from the Benchmark Foundation, David van Wyk.